Hello, quilting friends, and happy Feature Friday. I hope y'all are having a wonderful day and are looking forward to something fun this weekend. We are back at it with our sushi quilt, and I want to go over nesting with this particular quilt pattern. So I'm going to turn you guys around, show you where it's at, and we will get to nesting. So here we are. I've actually done a row of nesting, so I've got everything set and ready to go to do our third row of our pattern and our second row of nesting. And here on the display you can see our fun bubble pattern, and we have finished our row out and it is time to do our nesting. So I'm going to touch our nesting feature here, and like usual it comes up with select and mark your nesting point. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You guys know I like to kind of be in the middle of my quilt top, so I'm kind of in the middle here, and I like to drop my needle into my fabric on some of my stitching. Usually at a low point of the design. If you don't like to do that, I always tell you go ahead and use a marking tool, whether it's a chalk pencil, a marking pen, whatever you like to use, just as long as you are comfortable with it coming off your fabric. You can mark that spot instead of dropping your needle. Once you've done that, you can touch the check mark on the right hand side of your display. Your instructions change across the bottom of your display, and it will tell you to roll your quilt next. So I'll come down to the edge of my frame, unlock my rollers, and I will roll my quilt. Again, always roll your quilt carefully. I'm extra careful because I have my needle down in my fabric. I don't want to cause any damage or extra stress to that point where the needle is. So I'm going to go nice and slow. I want to make sure I have enough room behind the edge of my machine here where I've got a little space before it touches my roller bar, but I want to make sure that I have rolled my quilt enough so that all of my row can stitch out in my space. And then I'm going to just tighten up here on my front roller bar. Okay, so we have rolled the quilt and I can touch my check mark here. Now it says move the machine to your nesting point. Well, for me, my needle is in my nesting point, so I don't have to move my machine anywhere. But if you mark this point with a marking tool, you want to recenter your machine over this point that you marked with your marking tool, so you move your machine into place. And I can hit my check mark here. Now, when I do that, this is what I wanted to show you guys. So my screen's looking a little crazy right now. So the grayed out row up here and down here is what I've already stitched out. And the black row in the orange layout box is what we want to stitch out. But I have some overlapping here. So the way the system kind of took what we have and nested this, I have to separate these a little bit. So this is a little bit different than what we usually get. Sometimes it's pretty spot on, and sometimes we have to move our rows closer together, but here we actually have to move this apart. And I don't know that I've showed you guys moving this apart, let alone something that's overlapped quite this much. So my instructions say move the machine to place the nested row. So we are going to do that. But first, I need to pull my needle out of my fabric. So I am going to raise my needle first before I do anything. And for me, I am going to use my move button to move my nested rows with my handlebar. So I'm going to highlight that. And to pull my rows apart, I'm going to move my machine with my handlebars towards me. And when I do that, it will pull the rows apart from each other so that they're no longer overlapping. That was a lot of overlap we had. So I'm going to try and just separate these enough where the bubbles are just barely separated from each other. I don't know if you can see that with kind of these little bubbles here. I want them just barely separated because in the design, they're mostly kind of just touching each other on the edges. So I want to make sure there's enough space here so that they're not quite touching each other, but they're pretty darn close. So I did that. I was very careful to just move my machine towards me. I didn't shift it horizontally so that my rows line up on the edges, so that my edges here, they will line up. But I had to get them separated here across the middle. So now that I've moved that, I think that looks okay now. I'm going to touch my green check mark. My gray is gone. It said nesting complete real quick. That flashed. And this is my new nested row. I want to just double check that this went in the right place. So what I'm going to do is move my crosshairs, which is where my needle's at. I'm going to slide that up to where my horizontal blue line of my crosshairs is at the top of my layout box. And I'm going to come and look on my quilt top and make sure that my stitching, I've got this big wad of thread right here, make sure that my stitching isn't going to overlap. So right here, I can see I'm still at the top, and I can see the stitching of my last bubble under there, and they would not overlap. And I can kind of just cruise down a little bit. So I'm at the top here of this big bubble, and I am not touching the stitching of that little bubble. So I am very close, but I did not overlap anything. So I think we did a great job pulling these rows apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch down my sides really quickly. I think I need to straighten this out a little bit. I got a little crooked when I rolled this, so I'm gonna straighten this out, stitch my sides down, and then we'll get started. I'll be back with you in just a second. Okay, so I have my sides stitched down on the right and the left, and we are ready to stitch out our nested row. My needle's engaged. We'll touch our green skittle there. My needle is up, so we are going to start with our green check mark. It's going to come to the top here of my little green dot to start our next row. And instructions as usual, we'll take our stitch and touch our green check mark, pull up our bobbin thread so we have both of those available, and touch our green check mark. We'll center back in place, and we'll do our cycle to do our lock stitch and touch our green check mark, turn our stitching on, and touch our green check mark, and off we go. And I just want to let this run a little bit until we get to the top of our circle so we can see how close we actually got with our nesting. Oh, I think we did a really good job, everybody. I'm gonna come around the side here and see if I can get a better view. Well, I would say we got pretty darn close between our old row and our new row. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna let this stitch out, and we'll come back when everything is done between our next set of rows. All right, so we are done with our nested row, and it's looking pretty good. But I want to show you one thing. So if you look over here, I have a wonky little circle. And I have a wonky little circle because I had this wound up in the wheels of my carriage down here, and I had a little blippy. So Make sure when you're trimming threads as you're going along your quilt top that you make sure you get all of your threads either thrown on your floor, far away from your quilt top, or into a trash can, because apparently that one landed somewhere close enough to my track system where it got caught in my wheels and caused a little blippy in my system. I guess my wheel got caught on that thread and pulled for a second. So be careful where you throw your threads. And I hope that that was a good adventure in moving some rows apart in your nesting when they overlap an awful lot going through the nesting system. I'm going to keep working on this, and you guys have a great day. Thanks so much for joining me.